I'm turning on the, and you guys see the cameras on.
But there's like around the holiday, like November. They're person per night.
I found my button.
Yeah,
Yeah, I found my button.
No, it's still not muted.
Oh, it's still not muted.
Tell, like, you know what I mean? It's not like it's at the plaza, like maybe, but you know, I was like,
Hi, Kay.
and I don't.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, how's everybody?
We're doing well. How are you? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great. There we go. Okay, now I can see you.
Okay, good. We're a little bit early, so we're not going to get started yet.
No worries.
Okay.
I just thought I'd join in on the fun.
Oh, awesome. We're partying in here, you know, having a party about childcare and early childhood education.
Oh, lovely. Good. I'm excited. Thank you all for being here.
She exists still.
Can I raise the volume on this thing? I think you can.
Is that it?
I don't know.
Testing 1, 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yours, that's way better.
That's
Yeah.
good enough.
Okay. Good. I feel so far away from you. Can you zoom in now?
You want me to zoom in? Really?
You're welcome.
I feel better being far away.
So funny.
Oh, wow, you can say.
Is that good enough?
It's okay. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tracking.
I can't see you now, Maria.
Oh, okay. No problem. No problem. That's fine. I have stage fright anyway, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Okay, you don't want me to comment on Sunseekers, the press?
Oh, hi, Brian. Didn't see you
Hey.
there. No, that's okay. Wrong,
No,
Brian.
we're good.
Wrong, Brian.
Faux pas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I always name's Brian.
Oh.
So she forwarded me, I was like, well, I mean, that's my PIO.
No comment.
Mr. Comment on the hotel being sold.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
All right, I'm going to bring up the presentation to be prepared.
Take us like 2 years of our budget to buy that.
Oh, yeah, I mean.
To buy what?
I think it's only things. Yeah, that's the daycare facility for, it's new daycare.
The best in the world, right there.
Yeah. Say swimming lessons, culinary.
I'll take the
school.
handle.
Yeah.
I think we're onto something.
Exciting and big plans.
Christy, you'll keep an eye on the chat. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you. And now we just wait.
Are we on mute? Are we on?
What, you want me to put it on mute?
But
I didn't think about it.
I don't know. I'm a joke I'll say.
You're on record.
Hey, Maria.
Do air conditioning, do power.
Yes.
Hey, just, do you want me to mention that this is being recorded?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have 4 minutes to go, but yeah, if you want to do that when you introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
My mic at about 2:50 in about 2
Let's
minutes.
take her.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Brian, you're gonna get it.
That's right.
You're in trouble. Okay, I see it's 3:00. So we'll get going here with our webinar. I want to say good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today for our first Charlotte County Childcare Community Conversation, hosted by the Charlotte County Economic Development Office. My name is Tracy, and I'm the Director of the Economic Development Office. I'm honored to welcome you to this important discussion that directly impacts our community, our families, and our local economy. At Economic Development, our mission is to support businesses, create opportunities, and foster growth in our community. But we know that economic development isn't just about numbers and industries. It's about people. It's about our precious children. It's about ensuring our workforce has the resources and support they need to thrive, and childcare plays a critical role in that equation. Today, we have gathered voices around the state of Florida to address childcare, one of the biggest challenges facing our business community and workforce. This isn't just a family issue, it's an economic development issue. And when parents struggle to find reliable childcare, businesses lose valuable talent, productivity suffers, and our local economy feels the impact. That's why today's conversation is so important. My hope is that by the end of today's discussion, we will walk away with a deeper understanding of the challenges we are facing as a community and have a clearer vision of how we can work together to create solutions. With that, I want to introduce my colleague, Maria Vastola, our marketing manager, who will share her perspective on why this issue is so vital for our workforce and our community. Maria?
Thank you, Kay. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Maria Vastola. I'm the marketing manager for economic development, but more importantly, I'm the mother of 3. And I've personally experienced the challenge of trying to balance my career and family and how hard it's been to find early education, childcare, and that effect that it's had on my family. So I agree with Kay that this isn't just a family issue, it's also a work issue, which makes it an economic development issue. And that's why I'm so passionate about this issue. When parents can't find affordable quality childcare or they can't access it, which is equal to not having it, it affects the businesses, which affect the community. So that's why we're here together today, to bring together everybody's voices across the community to see if we can find solutions and discuss ways to support working families and strengthen our workforce. So my hope today is that we can all walk away from this conversation knowing a lot more about the childcare landscape and early child education in Charlotte County. So today, like I said, today's webinar is going to be about bringing together business leaders, community organizations, policy makers, and residents to explore innovative solutions and discuss actionable steps. And the most important thing that I wanted to take away from today's webinar is setting the stage for actionable steps, such as forming task forces or identifying funding opportunities or piloting new initiatives to help resolve the issues that we discussed today. With that being said, I'm going to do a quick introduction of all of our panelists, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'm grateful and honored to have all of you here. We're going to start with Anne. Anne is the Executive Director of the Early Learning Coalition of Florida's Heartland. We have Megan Greer, Partnership Manager for Future Makers. We have Dr. Brian Granstra, Director of Career and Technical Education and Career Readiness for Charlotte County Public Schools. That's a long one. And we have, oh, did I miss Casey? I'm so sorry. Casey, I skipped you. Casey Kennedy, founder and CEO of Bloom Academy. And we have Michaela, who's with us remotely, Michaela Buchanan, Director of Early Learning and Literacy from the Florida Chamber Foundation. We also have Olga from the Early Learning Coalition of Florida's Heartland, and we have Beth, also from the Early Learning Coalition. We also have Mark Odell from Charlotte County Economic Development, Jordan Ray, Charlotte County Economic Development, and Christy Sisler, Charlotte County Economic Development. So we're going to go in and let each of our panelists talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and what their areas of interest in this subject are. So Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate this opportunity to come together and talk about the irreducible needs of our families in Charlotte County, especially focused on childcare. And I'd like to just take a quick peek at our mission and vision for the Early Learning Coalition of Florida's Heartland. So just to explain what we're about, we are a private nonprofit, primarily funded through Department of Education Division of Early Learning, to administer school readiness and voluntary pre-kindergarten programs. And we actually have a 4-county service area. Today, of course, we're talking about Charlotte County. We are really focused on high quality early caring education and making sure that families do have access to programs that they need in order to work or go to school. We also serve as a point of access for resources and referrals. It's another big piece of the work that we do. We're very heavily concentrated on children having that strong early foundation for a lifetime of success, and that happens through quality programming and families that have the resources that they need. So just kind of us in a nutshell. Go on to the next slide. We're actually one of 30 coalitions in the state of Florida. So we're that yellow one, kind of 2/3 of the way down the state. So again, 4-county service area. Just wanted to show that we are part of a system, and early learning coalitions across the state are very concerned about high quality programming, and also that families have access. And that accessibility is where things can become a very sticky wicket. As we look at Charlotte County specifically, we'll be looking at childcare deserts and the accessibilities our families have. So going on to the next slide. Snapshot for Charlotte County. Ooh, my numbers kind of jumped around there. So pretend like they're all in a nice even column there as they are on my paper. In Charlotte County, we have 67 legally operating providers. As I talk through the breakdown, child care providers choose to be contracted as a school readiness, which is financial aid for child care services, and or voluntary pre-kindergarten programs. Voluntary pre-kindergarten, or VPK, is free preschool the year prior to kindergarten entry. So 67 total in Charlotte County. The Early Learning Coalition is contracted with 50 of those providers for school readiness and 41 providers for VPK. Most of them thinking that that VPK piece are both school readiness and VPK. So we're looking at a lot of children who are doubly funded, if you will, maybe have VPK in the morning and then have that school readiness wrap, financial aid for childcare in the afternoon. Our number of school readiness children that we're serving as of right now, and we were looking at numbers that we reported out to our board last week, is 572. So we're looking at children who are economically disadvantaged, ages birth to 13. So infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school agers. And then we're also looking at families who are considered at risk and coming in via referral. So that can be domestic violence, homelessness, an open protective services case. So we're looking at families with some very, very high needs when we think about school readiness and lifetime success. Those are families that really need our support and need quality programs to go to. For the VPK piece, so again, 41 providers, we have 785 VPK children in Charlotte County, and this is not income-based. So we're looking at children who have that criteria of being right prior to the age of starting kindergarten. So those are incoming kindergartners. Another piece of information we wanted to share with you. So thinking about our 572, we have another batch of children that we also are watching. So our coalition is very concerned about families who are in need of childcare, who are economically disadvantaged, and are coming onto our wait list. They have to be processed through the Division of Early Learning's portal system in order to be able to access the financial assistance. We don't want them languishing there. We don't want them sitting for a long time. So our Family Services Department is very good about bringing families off of the wait list very quickly. And I would say about monthly. We've really got it timed well that we don't have families sitting. But sometimes what's happening is we have families who have been called in from the wait list. They're eligible for services. We've got the funding to help them, but they don't enroll anywhere. They don't land anywhere. And we are actively reaching out to childcare providers asking, hey, do you have spots available? And they'll respond back. This is a monthly survey that we do. We provide that information to our families so they're aware of who is telling us they have slots available. From there, it's all parental choice. So families have that opportunity to reach out to the provider and see where they might be able to have their child land. But we still have children 122 as of right now who are not enrolled. They're eligible. We've got the funding, but they're not enrolled. And that's where we're looking at. We've got that child care desert at play. Of those children, 66 are birth to 5, not yet in school. 56 are school agers. Next slide, please. So, to explain what school readiness services are, again, that financial aid for childcare, it's that financial assistance for eligible families, and we've listed here what that eligibility looks like. So most of our services are for economically disadvantaged. That's the broad majority, about 70%-ish of who we serve in Charlotte County. So we're looking at families who are working at least 20 hours per week or going to school, or it could be that the family's been referred in through a community partner, again, domestic violence, homelessness, et cetera, that they have a referral in, and the income is not the issue. It is that referral that we base the service on, or the parent has a proven disability. Parents have to have a choice. This is by law of contracted childcare programs. We're not allowed to tell them where to go. However, the state does have criteria in place to help with that quality issue, because we know that's good for kids. So we are quality focused. We do want to make sure parents have a wide variety of providers to choose from. So the eligibility varies. The financial assistance is definitely there in Charlotte County. Parents do have a choice, but we still have that eligible, not enrolled. And what we find is families seeking care want something either close to home, close to work. Sometimes it's a transportation issue. They have to walk, and there is not a facility that they can easily get to, given how large Charlotte County is, thinking about our different areas that we have childcare in. Next slide, please. So let's look at what this means to a family. We're going to tell a quick story about a guy named Derek. He's a single parent, has 2 children, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. It's a very common scenario that we see. He's come in through Portal and he has applied for funding. He works 38 hours a week, making about $29,640 annually, and he is definitely eligible for school readiness services. He has not gone over that 150% of the federal poverty level. So he definitely can come in for service. So we bring him in. The first thing we want to highlight is what childcare looks like without school readiness.
Did I go to the wrong one?
Okay. If you click at some other stuff, ought to come up. Let's hope it does. So without childcare subsidies, you can see that for a family like Derek's, he's really looking at the gross majority of his annual income going towards childcare. If he were to choose a quality childcare facility at the rates that are typical of childcare providers, what they charge in Charlotte County, looking at a cost of $21,840, which becomes an inaccessible care for him. And probably what will happen with Derek is he may choose not to work, or he may use illegal childcare. There is childcare that is not regulated. This is very dangerous for young children. He may leave his children with a babysitter, but he will not necessarily have access to a quality facility for his children. And again, a lot out of pocket otherwise. So what we want to be able to do for our Charlotte County families is assure that they have childcare that is affordable. And I really have to emphasize that word, affordable. Childcare subsidies created by the Florida legislature are not meant to provide a free childcare program. It's an affordable childcare program. So in this same scenario with Derek, he's gotten in, we've brought him in, he has chosen a program, he's good to roll with his school readiness funding. He's now brought his payments down with the legislatively mandated parent fee to $1,560 annually. Big difference from the 21, almost 22,000 we were just talking about. The coalition then, with the funds that we receive from the Division of Early Learning, state and federal subsidies, would be paying the remainder of that child care provider's fee. So there are rates that we are allowed to pay. The family is assessed a family fee. There could be a provider differential if the provider charges above what we are allowed to pay. That is possible to have happen. But we're looking at usually a relatively smaller and much more affordable cost of care for this family. And we go on to the last slide. Something that I'd like for us to just kind of put in our minds as we think about the economy, as we think about the cost of care in Charlotte County, and we think about the accessibility. Ellen Galinsky, who is very well known for Mind in the Making and the work that she has done with helping us to understand the ins and outs of the classroom and working with children, stated childcare is an invisible part of the economy. And what she meant by that was that she's referring to the idea that economists don't always look at childcare when they're looking at the overall economic impact. They're not studying the people who are employed in childcare, and they are not considering how childcare in and of itself is the foundational piece to families being able to work. Without it, families can't work. Children thrive in quality programs. Families need access to affordable, quality-based programs. We see in Charlotte County that we do have pockets of deserts as evidenced by our children eligible, not enrolled, and we're very concerned about that. And we would like to continue conversations to assure that we have childcare available to all families, whether it's a transportation issue or looking at areas where we're just devoid of any kind of care type. Is there anything I missed as I look at my colleague? You okay?
Just one thing that I wanted to add, and you mentioned that some of the provider or the parents aren't lending. But one of the things I just want to make sure that I say this out loud to the group is that when families call and if they're looking at one specific program that they want to take their 2 or 3 children to, we do encourage them to consider to place a child or their children maybe in separate locations so they can go to work or they can go to school. But we've noticed recently is that they're trying to avoid that because they have to have a child over in Punta Gorda, cross the bridge at a facility on this side of the bridge, and then have to drive back. So some of them are looking at that saying, okay, that's a problem because then that takes my time. And so that's one of the things. So we do try to encourage them to consider that. But in some cases, then we have that number of eligible not enrolled because they're choosing not to enroll them. So that's one of the things I do want to share, that we do try to counsel them and encourage them to, and then once they do find if site 1 is available for both of the kids, then we can help them transfer that other child over. So we do try to encourage them to do that, but we're hearing more of that. So that's become difficult.
A lot of accessibility issues for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So up next, we have Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Greer. I am with the Collaboratory and I'm a future maker. And so if you're not familiar with the Future Makers Coalition, we are full cradle to career workforce pipeline kind of cohort and think tank. So we work together all the way from early childhood, looking at PPK enrollment, school readiness, 3rd grade reading scores, 8th grade math, all the way through graduation, supporting dual enrollment, all those things, and then getting into persistence and completion, finishing school, and then getting gainfully employed. And so it's looking at the entire spectrum. And what often happens is we have 4 different kind of cohorts within the whole coalition that focus on each age group or like the progression through all the way to workforce. But it's really a cycle because as soon as you're into the workforce, most likely, or some individuals will start having children, and then they're going to need that wraparound support again. So as soon as you just continually keeps going. And so the goal is with all the convening of different partners, on the lower, younger age with education, is seeing where those gaps are for parents and the accessibility issues for students and their families, and then how does that transfer into workforce as that cycle continues. So where can we identify those gaps? Where can we have those those conversations, not only with the colleges and universities of making sure that there's enough teachers and employees to fill those positions in order to support childcare needs and educational needs. But also, how can we work with employers to help their employees retain their work there and enjoy their work there, feel safe, feel that their children are safe while they're at work, and be able to everyone go home at the end of the day not completely exhausted and, trying to just stay on the rat race. So it's really been, I think, a revolution of data collection and anecdotal collection over and over again, so finding small wins and sharing out new ways to operate and then moving on to the next, big problem. So, say data begets more data. And once you identify an issue that is solvable, generally a little bit smaller, then we start to work on bigger picture items.
Thank you very much. And next we have Casey.
So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Casey Kennedy. I am formerly a public school teacher turned mom turned childcare owner. And so for the last 12 years, I've really grown with Charlotte County. I should mention that I'm born and raised here. So I've really seen a huge evolution happening in Charlotte County and am excited about the fact that young families are choosing to move here. And 12 years ago, many people thought I was crazy for opening a childcare center. I was crazy. Briefly, I learned that during the first year. But what I've seen is a shift in focus, and it's only been in the last couple of years where people are actually noticing the amazing work that childcare does and the importance that it has in the community. Unfortunately, being a public school teacher and then being in the childcare industry, I can tell you that the expectations for childcare in the last 5 years have grown so much. It is a huge responsibility. It's undervalued. And we have the hiring pool that we have are amazing women and men. A lot more men lately. Not a lot, but
I heard
that's a great thing. Yeah. But these are people that mostly are high school educated. They have a passion for children, and we're trying to hold them accountable to things that they've never been trained to do. We're giving them scores. They're being graded. I mean, the requirements for hiring for them to even start their job are a huge barrier to entry. It's making employers like us we have to essentially get them through schooling to be able to employ them, which is not something that any employer has to do, and try to keep them in the lane coming to our school until just to prevent them from going somewhere else, going to Target, going to McDonald's, because competitively, their pay is increasing, ours is increasing. Not to mention all the while trying to balance the scale between keeping childcare affordable and making sure that we're taking care of our people. And I know that the ladies from the coalition can vouch for the fact that the wages in childcare have gone up drastically in the last 5 years, which is amazing. So has the cost of childcare. But it wasn't just for those wages. It's also been, we've all experienced the food supply costs at home. Can you imagine what it's like to feed 200 children each day and then have parents that don't understand why their tuition is going up? Also, everyone's being impacted by insurance in some way. Childcare, it's becoming almost impossible to get liability policies, not just in Florida, but in the nation. So if you're a new provider that wants to open a center right now, you cannot. You cannot get a policy unless you are a franchise, like you're opening as a franchise, or you have owner's experience, like you have been a previous owner. So that alone is stifling growth in childcare. It makes, seasoned owners can open more centers, but you either have to partner with somebody who's already an owner or become a franchise to open a new center. And even those liability policies have gone up. I think last year our policy went up 35%, and then this year it went up 40%. Oh my God. So that alone created a tuition increase of over 10%, just the liability policy. And that's for schools. We have multiple schools. We've had 0 claims in 12 years. So we're operating in their eyes, in a great way, but we're just experiencing these increases and having to not be able to get rated carriers. And there's so much liability in childcare. So just to touch on that. And then second to that is a focus on our employees. Somehow we have to empower childcare center owners to be able to compensate their employees better if we're going to keep these expectations for them and want a big part of providing quality care is continuity of care. So how can we keep these amazing people in our system? Even for us, we put them through school. We partner with the Teach Scholarship, which is an amazing program that Florida offers. It keeps them with us for some time, but as soon as they're done, we can't offer all the benefits that the public school offers. So we basically coach them up and then they leave. And parents' expectations are increasing, and I don't blame them. Like, as a mom myself, I opened a school because I wanted another option for my child. And at that time, Charlotte County only had a couple. Honestly, they probably sell the same options plus Bloom in Punta Gorda. But the parents have much higher expectations for their kids when they enter kindergarten, and the pressure that it puts on those early childhood teachers is a lot to ask for what they're able to make in compensation. And for smaller providers, mom and pop single locations, benefits are non-existent. They can't afford to do that. They can't get health insurance policies. So I think I'm really just thankful that we're now being noticed. And I'm hopeful that Charlotte County recognizes that, because if Charlotte County can do something to support this, it will substantially support the growth of the young population in our area, which I think is a great place to raise a family. If you can't find childcare, then move somewhere else.
That's why we're here.
Well said.
Yes, thank you, Casey. Dr. Granstra.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this important conversation. So as Director of Career and Technical Education, that's my shorter title, we focus on, really developing the workforce, also driving the economy. And we want to, for our students to have the opportunity to get high-paying jobs in their chosen field. And also we want to make it so employers want to expand or locate to Charlotte County to help grow our economy here. In Charlotte County Public Schools, every student is given the opportunity. It's called choosing your E, whether on be employed, enlisted, enrolled on high school graduation. And once you choose which E you want to do, you're given a checklist to complete. The goal is to complete that by graduation. So when you graduate high school, you are ready for your chosen E. Charlotte County, we're really big on driving the economy, trying to bring in, work with our economic development office to bring in employers. We partner with Space Florida. Space Florida is a state organization charged with attracting the aerospace, fun. All right. That's right. Aerospace industry into Charlotte County. We were the first school district in Florida to be recognized by Space Florida as a Space Academy school district. So at Charlotte High, we have 2 aerospace programs there. We're building a breaking ground on a new hangar at Charlotte High School on February 25th. So watch the news for that one. At Charlotte Technical College, we broke ground last December for a new hangar at the airport for our FAA airframe power plant mechanic program. At Port Charlotte High School, we're starting an advanced manufacturing program in partnership with the Department of Defense in terms of the curriculum. Charlotte Technical College is also adding an advanced manufacturing program for adults, all related to Space Florida. And then London Bay High School will be having a cybersecurity program added there in partnership with Cyber Florida. So we're getting these programs here. Now we've had a history of offering, early childhood education programs at Charlotte Technical College. The challenge we had was there was very low student interest in the programs. You visit the class, there may be a small handful of students there, and just economically, it just didn't make sense for us to maintain that program because we just didn't have the student engagement. So there's always a chance for a pivot. How can we do things better to meet the needs of the workforce? Had the honor of meeting Ms. Kennedy earlier last October, I think it was, we met, and we discussed, what can we do? Well, Charlotte County has an adult education program. Adult education consists of GED preparation courses and also ESOL, so English for students of other languages. And the ESOL students typically are very highly trained from their various countries they come from. Many of them have college degrees. I was over in the county working there. We had one ESOL class with 4 students who were doctors in their country, Latin America. One student delivered a baby a week ago and have them in class learning English. So there's a very talented workforce that's here. You may not see them all the time, but they are very, very talented. But how can we get it so we can get those folks who may be interested in working in childcare? Well, there's a certification you can get through DCF to work at an early childcare facility. So we submitted our application, wait for the approval from the Department of Education. When we get that approval, we'll start offering what's called an IET program, Integrated Education and Training. So students who are learning English can also train towards that childcare certification. They can work in a childcare facility. So therefore, we can increase the workforce. We're starting out with our goal to have at least 5 students enrolled per semester. We have 2 semesters a year. So 5 do it a semester. That's potentially 10 childcare workers. It doesn't take very long for that to start making a real big dent in the workforce. Because when that program finally gets approved, we'll call the childcare provider and say, okay, hey, let's go. What can we do to make sure so when they leave, they finish the program, they're ready to work, the workforce. And then that way we don't worry about training them ahead of time. They're ready to go, ready to work, and they meet the needs of what the childcare facilities need. These are often these individuals have children of their own. So working at a childcare facility could be advantageous for them. And so how can we use the resource we have to help grow the workforce? Because all these companies we're trying to bring in to Charlotte County, they need childcare. One of the first questions they ask. So there's our workforce and there's our childcare. I think we can work with the school district. We can do our part to at least help grow the workforce. Our initial goal is 5 students per semester. Once we get good at it, we want to grow it to be whatever the student interest is. And so all the students want to do it, great. But you want to start somewhere, start small, build a program that's all about meeting the needs of the workforce and helping students who want to go and explore a career in childcare. And then if they're interested, I always believe in different on-ramps and off-ramps. So a good career and technical education program, the student has different chances where they can do this line of work, get this job, they really like it, they keep on going. So the partner with, say, schools like FSW, the early childhood program there, students want to continue with their progress. And so that's where we are in a nutshell. I'm open to the conversation. Hopefully it's a good discussion there, and hopefully we get a lot of people online watching as well.
Thank you. All right. And then online, we have Michaela Buchanan. Michaela, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. And are we going to do slides now? Yeah, There we
Yes.
go. Okay. All right, next slide, please. So that was a great segue, I think, because the Florida Chamber Foundation is, of course, the voice of the business community, and we are uniting the business community for good. And my role there is the Director of Early Learning and Literacy. So my focus really is around how do we get Florida to be the #1 state in the nation for early learning by 2030. You can see here that by 2030, we have a full blueprint of how we want to achieve our goals. And we have 6 pillars. So the work that we're talking about today fits in our talent, supply, and education pillar. Next slide. I'm not going to read all these to you, but it basically shows you that there are 39 goals we have, right? Because we know we need a good business climate. And of course we need, regulatory nature, and, we need our, cut child poverty in half, things like that. But we also need to make sure that every kindergartner is ready on day 1. And we need to make sure that our 3rd graders can read on or above grade level. And for the folks on the call today, that work starts at birth. Next slide. So we track how we're doing against all of our goals, and then I'll get into sort of the meat and potatoes of all of this on 2 public-facing tools that you can use anytime. So what I'm going to talk about related to Charlotte County, when I talk about zip codes or school-level data, you can look that up as we're talking about it, whether it be on the Florida scorecard on the left or the Florida Gap Map. Next slide. And the scorecard's going to have a lot of data, and I'm actually going to skip this one. It's going to tell you all sorts of things at a statewide level, but you can also go to a county level. So the first big point I want to bring up as it relates to workforce development and how this all comes together. Oh, I'm getting feedback.
It's from here, but.
Muted all.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, mute.
Wait, Michaela, we need to unmute you. Hold on.
She's not muted.
Oh, are you there, Michaela?
You're muted.
Oh, I'm muted.
We might be.
Michaela's muted.
Let me find her. Hold on.
Okay, I'm not sure how I got muted, but I kept getting feedback, so I wasn't sure what was happening. So I'm really sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
That's okay. Let me pull that.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, that's where I was. That's good. So basically, the first, yeah. So
Okay.
the first, yeah. Sorry, I thought there was a
fine.
question, so I was like waiting. Okay, so the first big data point that I want to bring up that you can find on the scorecard is the fact that as all of this relates to workforce development, we always talk about this as a 2-generation workforce issue. So childcare, access to early learning, that impacts the workforce of today, because it's current employees of real businesses who have children, and of course is preparing our future generations, the workforce of tomorrow. As we look at the number of open jobs in Florida compared to the number of individuals looking for work, we have less folks looking for work than there are jobs. Right, so this is a tight labor market, and if you look at, and it varies by county, right? So you're in Charlotte County, you actually have more people looking for jobs. I don't know how many of those are qualified for the jobs that you have available, but the reality is that most folks need childcare. Next slide, please. If they're going to take a job. And so how does this all sort of relate? Why do we talk about it as the two-generation workforce issue? We like to lead with the data here, and you can see pretty clearly that this is why, right? So we have VPK data. We wish we had more data around before children entered VPK program, which is the voluntary pre-kindergarten program, right, that the children at 4 years old have access to. But we can see that if a child completes VPK, they're more likely to be kindergarten ready. And you have 51% of kids who are kindergarten ready in Florida. 55% of them read on grade level, and that sort of trajectory continues through 8th grade and beyond, right? We know that there's an impact on high school graduation, incarceration rates, overall earning potential, like those are messaging points that have been talked about for a really long time. So how does Charlotte County stack up? Go to the next slide. So you're doing slightly better in kindergarten readiness, and then therefore no shock, a little bit better in 3rd grade reading, and that's good, right? But what does it look like if we were to see the kids who complete VPK? Where can we make improvements, right? So how could early learning access, affordable, quality early learning access really contribute and help us see those kindergarten readiness numbers go up and ultimately our 3rd grade reading scores go up, high school graduation, and so on? If we go to the next slide, we'll kind of see where I'm going with that. So right here, right, data speak for themselves. You see a 23% gap between children who complete VPK and children who do not complete VPK in Charlotte County. So 68% are ready for kindergarten, 45% are not ready for kindergarten, and it's solely, of course, we don't know anything about those children other than VPK, but that's the impact of just those 540 hours and then whatever their early learning experience was before that point. Perhaps it was through the school readiness program or a Head Start program. What's interesting is that on the gap map data, we can actually see where these children are enrolled in school. And you can see that within Charlotte County, there are pretty significant gaps between the percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in school, which might go back to that conversation that Ann was having at the Early Learning Coalition about eligible school readiness children, but they're not using that for whatever reason. And you might be looking at right here on this map where that childcare desert sits. I'm not sure, we could look deeper, but you've got 100% of children enrolled in one zip code and less than 10% in the zip code next door, right? So we might want to ask ourselves some questions. Is there enough access in that space? Are there enough seats, right? And then if you have seats, do you have enough teachers? Are there pipelines to build those teachers? And then is the care affordable? So next slide, please. So I told you guys that 3rd grade reading was like my North Star, and we're trying to get to 100% 3rd grade reading. And again, we see that there's a clear connection between early learning experience and 3rd grade reading, right? Just using Florida data, using Charlotte County-based data. You have about 30% of all of your 3rd graders in the county who did participate in VPK. But again, you can kind of see this gap, right? If they went to VPK versus if they didn't go to VPK. And how does that correlate to your school grades, right? Your 3rd grade reading scores by school. Like there's also a disparity there. So we could compare those back to that map I just showed you of zip code level data of the percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in school. And we might be able to draw some conclusions here on your 3rd grade reading scores where there's a gap between your highest performing school and your lowest performing school of about 25%. Okay, next slide. So that's the economic data. That's sort of like, what are we doing to build the workforce of tomorrow? And this is where we start to transition into some of the things that we talk about and look at as it relates to workforce development and the workforce of today. So not only do we see sort of that cognitive, the academic-based stuff happening in early learning, we're also seeing the really employability skills developed before kids ever get to kindergarten. And so, at the Florida Chamber, we're obviously connecting with business leaders all the time. And a lot of folks are saying, oh, they're not coming in with communication skills. Their time management is off, their organization. And again, these are not things that children learn or students learn in high school or college. They're things that their wiring is happening before they ever get to our K-12 school district doors. and meaning that we need to make sure that all children have access if we want them to have these employability skills in the future. And I think that's just a really important point for folks to realize when we talk about brain development and how important those first 5 years of life are. So next slide, that's why all of that and the sort of narrative that we tell, the context, why this is so important, is why the initiative of the Florida Chamber of Commerce Foundation exists, the Business Alliance for Early Learning Project. So we're bringing together business leaders, philanthropy, community leaders like yourselves, and really trying to come up with solutions, right? So those are like a whole host of problems around the data and how much, how many gaps there are and things of that nature. But what can we actually do about it? Well, we can, next slide, look at the fact that if 76% of, next slide, please. Can you hear me? Next slide.
Yeah, keep going.
Yes, next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so what can we do about that? So if we look at the fact that 76% of all children under the age of 6 in Collier County have all of their available caretakers in the workforce, meaning their parents or guardians, then as employers, right, as business leaders, we can step up to find solutions for making sure that they have access to early learning opportunities. That could look like on-site childcare, and we can get into that a little bit more when we talk about the tax credit. That might look like participating in a school readiness match with the Early Learning Coalition to fund some slots for employees. It could look a little bit like family-friendly policies, but we know that tuition assistance programs, things of that nature. But we know that we need to take action when this many children need care because their parents are not at home, they're at work. Next slide. So I think we jumped a couple, but that's okay.
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah,
Which one? Yeah.
go backwards.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Next one.
Yep. Next slide. Yeah,
You good.
you're good. So we're really heavy on the data of the chamber, but we think it's important, right? Because I think the data lead us to make investments in the right places. And so, you have 76% of parents in the workforce. You have your largest zip code where most people travel to work every day. So you're looking at net commuter patterns, right? You're seeing there's a lot of folks going into one zip code, and then you can see next door to it the percentage, like the commuter time, right? So we need to know how many slots are available in that particular zip code, right? Going back to the conversation around, do you prefer care by work? If your commute time is 27 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes, you might not want to have to travel across the county to get back home or to that doctor's appointment. And instead, you will miss work. You will cut your hours. You might ultimately quit your job, which we have some research to say that a lot of Florida families are unfortunately making that type of decision. Next slide, please. There you go. So access, and then we started to talk about a little bit about affordability. I heard folks start talking about that. So we're tracking this data. You can see that to everybody's point on the call, childcare costs have gone up. They have gone up above the national overall inflation by over 3%. So it is quite expensive as folks are dealing with additional housing burden costs because the cost of housing has gone up. As they're dealing with food costs, they're also dealing with childcare costs. And when you look at what that looks like at an actual county level, like what does that really mean for Charlotte County? We'll go to the next slide and you'll see what it costs to just send one infant to childcare. And these are median prices. So when you look at the median price, not even the average, you're spending more than $11,000 to send an infant to center-based care. And we could pull this for 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. It is a significant amount of money. Next slide. In fact, it is 14% of household income, again, median pricing based off of 2024 numbers. So when you're paying 14% of your household income on childcare, and then you have the majority of Charlotte County folks are spending at least 30% of their household income, so 44% in total, on just childcare and housing, that is a significant portion of their budget. There's not much room for them to do anything else, right? And so I think that's where we're really pushing the edge on the crisis that we have when we talk about access to affordable quality childcare, right? It is becoming too expensive for most families to access. So that's a lot of context. That's a lot of data. I'm going to stop there. I'll pick up where I left off whenever we talk about the tax credit and why the tax credit is such a good opportunity to be a part of the solution, given all of these vast challenges.
Do you want to go over this stuff, or do you want to do this?
I was going to do that later, but I can do it now if you want.
Yeah, if you want to do it now.
Okay. I pointed and alluded to the fact that a lot of Florida families, and I say a lot, 150,000 in the 6 months leading up to this report that we released last year before legislative session, 150,000 Florida families left their job because of childcare issues. It was the #1 reason that a parent quit their job in Florida. This is a huge problem for our economy. It is a $5.4 billion economic impact. We're not realizing significant portions of tax revenue. Employers are having a significant amount of turnover costs. They're seeing absenteeism rates. And if you look at the next slide, you can see that, here are the amount of time that these folks said that they were going to leave. So not only were they leaving the workforce, right? Like real people already in jobs. We didn't have to recruit them. They were already there. They were already skilled, qualified. They left. And then they said, 50% of them said, I'm going to be gone for at least a year. Think back, right? I told you, okay, there's 100 open jobs. There's 98 people looking for those 100 open jobs. Like that 150,000 people that left their job in Florida last year would have gone a long way to helping us with our talent shortage in many communities in our state. So childcare is a significant issue when we think of, finding the right talent, retaining the right talent. And then the next slide, you can see that this isn't just your entry-level worker, right? For the business community. This is all levels of degree earners. This impacts graduate level, folks with high school diplomas. So these are sometimes your vice presidents of organizations, your director levels, your managers, and they are quitting their jobs. So I think that sometimes we don't realize that this is, even as you go up the ladder, childcare solutions are still going to be important to you, even if you have a little bit more expendable income. You're not in maybe as a significant issue as a family making minimum wage, but they are still struggling to find the care that they are looking for. And then the last slide, I think for now, and you can see what this actually looks like, right? So between the high income earners and the low income earners, we have this data that shows, a third of folks in the lower income just worked less hours, right? So maybe they were working full time, they went down to part time, they were working part time, maybe they cut their hours there. And the higher income earners, they just delayed going back to work at all after they had their child. We do know when we look at some communities that might be because there's less infant and toddler slots. So maybe they just flat out couldn't find care, but so they delayed their entry into the workforce. And I'll just let you kind of sit for a minute here because I know there's a lot of numbers. But the point is that it impacts everybody. It might impact them a little bit differently, but there is a clear business and economic impact of childcare in Florida and right there in Charlotte County. So I'm happy to be a part of the conversation today. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about the tax credit and the opportunity that just opened up in October, and answer any questions along the way.
All right, thank you so much. So we'll circle back to the tax credit closer to the end, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're going to open up this portion of the webinar to questions from the audience. So I'll let Christy.
There's a couple that have been.
Okay, so I'll let Christy, I guess, read those out.
If you have a question, feel free to message it in the chat and then we'll read them out for the group. Let's see here, or comments. Lisa Rodriguez said, as a former single parent, these local programs are invaluable. As an HR director, I appreciate your assistance and helping the working poor. I hope our current administration will continue to support parents in this way. Next comment is a question from Angela Hogan. Question for the ELC. What are the age groups specifically of the families who are eligible for SR but are not enrolled? Is there a majority of ages 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, 2 to 3 or school age?
Go back to that slide. Yes.
Yeah.
So for the eligible not enrolled, ages birth to 5, meaning not yet in school, we currently have about 66 children that cannot seem to find a location. And then 56 of those are school aged. So as Ann pointed out, we do survey the currently contracted programs to ask what availability that is. Once we get the information from the providers, then we send out a mass email to those families saying, here are the ones that have indicated they have availability. We, of course, remind them that these are not the only families looking for childcare. We've got the folks that are not eligible for services, private paying citizens that are also competing for those spots as well. So we do encourage them to call right away and try to, connect with the childcare facility and talk to the directors about placing their children.
I think her question specifically is
sorry.
of the 0 to 5.
Yeah.
Is it predominantly infants and toddlers or preschool 4-year-olds?
I'm going to say that it's mainly infants and toddlers. That's usually one of our biggest areas where families are seeking. So if families have gone, or if a mom or the family's on maternity leave, once they come back, that's the one that they're having the tough time to place, is that infant.
And I think for people who are on there that are maybe unfamiliar with the territory and childcare, infants require at a minimum 1 teacher to every 4 infants, and the cost of care is much higher. So programs prioritize space for older children just because the older children essentially support the success of the school, and the younger children are there as a relationship builder. So the programs, even at the largest schools for infants, are very, very small.
Let's see here. Lindsay Schofield said, I understand accreditation in class, but what else do we? But how do we effectively? Okay, hold on. I'm getting a bunch of messages in here. High quality is a term related to ECE provision internationally. How do we effectively measure this?
I don't know what that means, so
What is the question? What did it have to be asked also? Same question.
I guess she must have adjusted it. Oh wait, she put 2 things. I understand accreditation in class, but what else do we draw from? Thank you. Also from Lindsay.
So Beth is going to respond, if that's okay. We do use the class tool and accreditation standards for sure, but there's also the health and safety standards, the ratios, which goes with the accreditation. So lower ratios come along with that too. So I think that covers it really. Then how do we measure the quality is the higher standards through accreditation and the teacher-child interactions, which come from the class tool.
I think if you were to put it like scaffold it, the base requirement to be operational is DCF licensing standards. So that would be like the base criteria to open a school. Doesn't necessarily mean it's high quality. And then the Early Learning Coalition, who provides the funding, if you want to contract with them to accept funding, they have not a little, a bigger chunk of requirements to raise the standards for what's happening in the classroom. I would say more about what teacher interaction, right? Curriculum, those are not requirements by the state for childcare. Childcare requirements for the state is more of a daycare requirement. The Early Learning Coalition elevates the requirements to be more of an education
by the state.
But right, so, and there's 2 state entities that we're kind of looking at here. So the basic piece, thinking about childcare regulation, would be Department of Children and Families, whereas Early Learning Coalitions are under the auspices of Division of Early Learning, and that's where we're looking at statute and rule and contracting, where those pieces have been elevated to support quality learning.
And accreditation goes even higher in some cases. So they have higher expectations.
really that's you're just signing up to go through a process to make sure that your ratios are smaller. There's other criteria set for accreditation to become accredited, and then you have to pay a hefty sum of money to become accredited in order to, in return, be considered an educational institute, which again is a point of reflection for these people who are giving a lot to our community. We have to fight to be considered an educational institute and to be granted some of those property exemptions and things that really support us being able to be successful. And for a mom and pop provider to navigate through that is nearly impossible. And I can speak for myself. When I first opened and operating in Punta Gorda, where at the time was predominantly a retirement community, churches could get that consideration quickly. a daycare. It was nearly get through that process.
Okay.
So. And parents don't really care about accreditation anymore. I hate to say that, but I think it's true. It's not something that they look at.
Convenience, cost, quality.
Yeah, they don't, it's not something that young millennial parents recognize as an indicator of quality. They're more about interaction. And so accreditation is something we're just paying money for and jumping through hoops to be able to be considered an educational institute. And it's another expense that's driving up the cost of childcare. Then you have to pay to be a member every year too.
Wow. New information.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so Devin says, please contact me at your convenience to offer financial and volunteer/mentor assistance. This issue is central to our community. That's a comment from Devin. Thank you, Devin. Frank DeFore asks, for the mention of illegal childcare, what is the state authority for accreditation? Is that part of the schooling needed to qualify employees for childcare?
You have to be licensed by the Department of Children and Families to legally operate a school or a family home daycare. And so an illegal operation would be that they're offering babysitting in their home for someone other than their own child without having a license. So they're not being inspected. They don't have a background check. They're not being regulated. They maybe don't have the safety standards in place. Their home is not child-proofed.
It could be warehousing children, so lots of kids without any proper interaction that may be sitting in front of the TV all day, so completely unregulated.
Okay, and then Lindsay had another question. I'm just wondering about the personnel that are qualified to work in ECE. How is this impacting the field?
It's having a huge impact in order to get people qualified, not because they're not great people, but the standards have changed in the last few years. And that if you are not just DCF licensed and you want to be accredited, you want to be eligible for school readiness and voluntary pre-kindergarten, you cannot have employees just start working and training, which in the past, that is basically what happened. You would hire them and you would do your internal training and they would be going through those courses while they were working so that they could start making an income. Now they essentially need to be done or take an alternative training to even be able to be employed. So the lead time to get an employee ready to work and is long.
How many months?
45-day class.
It's a 45-hour class, and then they have to go in person to a testing site to take tests.
But that's the year long. They have a year to do that. The pre-service training isn't 45 hours. Pre-service training is 20 hours. Yeah, they don't have to have all 45 hours. They have a year.
Okay.
But still, you potentially be trying to like pay someone.
They
to
can
do
take an
their
alternative training so that they can go into the classroom and work, but they still have to take the 45 hours.
Absolutely.
I should clarify that. We don't
Over the
do
course
that.
of a year.
Because it's just another thing we have to do. So we have them complete it beforehand. But then on top of that, go take those tests. There's limited testing sites. Sometimes you have to wait up to 6 weeks to take the test. Or even for some of our, like you have to have legally have to have a director and they have to have a credential. Courses that they're enrolling in that are required to be a director, they'll sign up for the course and then the week before the course starts, it's canceled due to lack of participation. So lots of barriers there. And it costs money. I mean, the courses are $45 roughly. I think it's $1 an hour for the courses, plus they have to pay for the exams.
Yeah.
There's also the cost of the background check. So just getting an employee through that costs roughly $200.
That's what we're trying to address with our program is so they finished, they met those requirements. But also we incorporated so go above and beyond, so they meet the needs of employers, cover the cost of the $45 per hour plus a test, background check. So they're ready to go. The population we're working with may not have those funds to do it. So we want to increase the workforce, which then increase the ability for childcare centers to expand in Charlotte County.
All right. So next question from Jerry Sutton of the CCHSC Fatherhood. I can't see the rest of it. Asks, we as service providers have identified that there is an education concern for years. What is the root cause so that we can improve it?
If we want to take that one. I guess it depends on what I mean, without any data, to support, I just know anecdotally, it's, our students have a lot of options for careers they choose. So the K-12 side, there's, like, say, we're still launching a program at Atlanta Bay High School where graduates potentially can make $75,000 a year in cybersecurity. That's some real money you're talking about. We recently had 4 graduates of Charlotte Technical College with the A&B program. It hired starting wage $75,000 to work on airplane engines. And then that's not including overtime, promotion, you name it. So there's a lot of options. So just in terms of student interest, they have a lot of things they can choose from. We know in general, like K-12 education, there's less people going into K-12 preparation programs, nationwide. They're working against those trends. So to back to before, so what can we do to meet the immediate need of the childcare centers of having employees as the entry level employees? And then they see an interest with hopefully maybe with partnership with the employers and local education institutions, can we grow those employees who really want to go and stay in that field?
It's hard when you have a list of jobs and then their annual salaries. And early childhood education is listed at the lowest. So a high schooler or a college person's not going to choose that, even though it might be their niche in life and could potentially be a great career for them. Myself, it's my career, but they might choose a higher paying profession. So,
Yeah, and that's like the balance of making it affordable and being able to compensate employees fairly.
Yeah.
right.
In childcare in general, the wages are roughly 50% of the cost of running a childcare center. And they're not compensated enough for what they do every day. And we're held to such a high standard. And unlike a public school, we're open 52 weeks out of the year. They don't get a break. And it is a high stress environment. They're very passionate people, but it's not a good situation that as a society we're putting ourselves into for the most important people, the littlest one.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that answer. So Angela Hogan asked, how are local affordable rates determined? Are they set by the state or the local ELC? The rates for infants and 1-year-olds make it cost prohibitive for providers. We get calls from parents every day, but can't expand these classrooms due to cost.
So that's a state-run piece. Providers respond to a survey, and rates are determined from that information. That is state, yeah. The state and posted on our website.
That's a state run.
Yeah.
Sorry. Our state run. All right. Next comment is just a shout out to Casey from Claudette Smith. We feel extremely blessed to be
I thought
to be a Bloom family and appreciate the quality care she provides families in Charlotte. Thank you, Claudette. So, shout out. Let's see here. Tina Rambo asks, in addition, yet the SR presents pre-service classes will get them in the classroom, but then they also have to do the remainder 45 hours. So they are taking more classes for the same outcome. It's a lot for new employees.
It's a huge lift and it's not easy. Like navigating, getting a user, getting registered for the site, going through the process, it's very confusing. And so we at Bloom, we've created like drip campaigns through email that like walks them through the process, and you almost have to like mentor them to, truthfully, to get them through it because it's not easy.
Yeah. And while they're necessary because it's health and safety and their skills that the employees need, the compensation should match the training because they do need the training. It's absolutely critical.
And specifically for BPK, and that is such a huge responsibility, and the credential requirements for that are trying to match that responsibility, which I think is amazing, but there's not much incentive there for those people to stick around in that job as a pre-K teacher. You have to be credentialed, and eventually they go to the public school because they can
have benefits,
increased wages, a more flexible schedule. Thing.
Okay. All right. Next comment is from Angela Hogan. Casey is awesome. We are grateful to her for answering our 1,000 questions since we got run last year. Yeah, so congrats on it.
Stan Chandler asks, is there a square foot standard per child for green space activities for daycare?
And is a green space mandatory? And also, what is the name of the program that assists lunches for daycare? Thank you.
The requirement for outside space, unless you have an urban exemption, which we wouldn't really get in Charlotte County, is 45 square foot per child, but it's only for half of your license capacity. So if you had a school of 200, you would need 100 times 45 square feet of outside space, which is pretty substantial. And then there's 2 required outside times per day minimum. Children must take it outside twice a day. I think that's what he's asking. And then childcare food program is the food program subsidy.
Childcare
USDA.
the food program. Okay, good.
USDA.
USDA, yes.
Barbara Short says, career source is available to provide funding for career laddering training if eligibility criteria are met for our various programs. The comment from Barbara Short. Thank you for that comment.
Here's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next comment or question is from Lindsay Schofield. It is a huge topic of discussion in the early childhood field in terms of what it is we are valuing within early childhood education. We are going beyond daycare, quote, provision, especially if we are connecting childhood outcomes in relation to schooling. There are discrepancies between the expected qualifications. There are discrepancies between the expected qualifications needed. That's more of a comment. She's saying they're tying the outcomes. Okay, thank you for that comment, Lindsay. Do we have any more questions?
Just add something.
Sure.
We were so pleased when we went to visit your facility, and you were very proud. Your workers were extremely proud. You could tell they're engaged. They wanted to be there. Watching the vibe, you're at day to day. I'm looking at a macro level that they're engaged, hustling around, doing their thing. And one of the things that was really impressed me, and many things, was the fact on the safety inspections. You know, they could be called on for random inspections at any time. You people are right. Welcome. Come on. You know, we're not afraid of the inspector comes. You think, no, scared, let's hurry, get things ready. No, everything's on point all the time. That's, you know,
I think that's
very,
been
very
a shift in our county over the last,
Yeah.
I would say even 5 years, maybe even the more recent years, but the relationship between our DCF inspectors and our early learning coalition inspectors has really been evolving. It's not a gotcha situation. It's more of a teamwork. And that has a lot to do with the early learning coalition. And their approach has changed in the last few years, and it's really supportive. And it's the way that we approach our team. We don't want them to be afraid of that. But it also has a lot to do with the way the inspectors are approaching their duty at the school, you know?
Yeah,
And so
but it is.
Yeah, they think of it as a team.
More and more coaching. Expecting.
Yeah, it's great. And just to go back into what you said earlier with Derek's story, and just on the this helps me. My role is in business retention expansion, so a lot of angles on childcare, mobility, workforce. But in this case, the sliding scale fee based. I'm sorry, the family fee by state statute. Is that a static 5% or is that on a sliding scale? I just wasn't clear.
It's on a sliding scale.
Okay, it's on a
and-
sliding scale.
And
Okay,
it is posted on our website.
gotcha.
Yeah, and it's based on the family size and gross annual income.
Okay, so that was based on Derek's story.
Yes,
Okay, gotcha.
right.
Thanks.
Melissa Bao asked, could you please distribute this PowerPoint presentation to attendees?
Yes, and also this recording will be available to the attendees as well.
You did push record, right, Marie?
I did press record, yes. So I got some questions from the audience pre-webinar, which I'm going to ask just a couple of them. We're only going to go for a couple of minutes on the Q&A session, but here's one that I found really interesting. It says, where can parents who are preparing to return to the workforce after caring for young children find resources and support? Megan, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Future Makers is a wonderful place to start. We have a navigator program that would help them if they are identifying if they want a career change. They can help them identify best programs for them that would fit within their family structure and their needs for moving forward. Or if they already know what they want to do, they can help them get connected. We have an employment connector specialist. So that's a really seamless way to get tied back in. If there's credentials that they need to go back and get, we've had a great grant with FGCU, the ADA, the Good Jobs Challenge grant that was helping to subsidize even just small fee costs or even tuition needs for individuals to go back and get credentialed if need be. And sometimes we found that, individuals weren't going back to school because they had something as little as, $1,000 late fee or payment that we worked with FGCU and some other organizations to remove their fees and so that people could go back to school with that. So that's just identifying system issues within the workforce and returning to work. Career Source is also a great partner and they have many resources as well. But when you have employee recruitment specialists, it's really helpful to know which employers are looking for what type of employees and making those connections quickly. So they'll help with everything from resume building to setting up interviews and practicing interviewing before going back to work.
Sorry, awesome. Thank you for that. This is an interesting question. What are some tips on getting your child enrolled even when there is a long waiting list at your preferred center?
Go to the school.
Stalk them? Is that
No,
the
it's
answer?
true. Like people, childcare providers are getting a lot of phone calls and directors and people on site are very busy. So the openings that are happening are not scheduled. It's happening at short notice because somebody's moving or something's happening. And your presence at the school is 100% going to make a difference because you're already engaging or at the right place at the right time, just making that relationship. So I know at Bloom that does make a difference. Some schools offer drop-in care so that you can pick up spaces when people are absent. That also builds a relationship. And when there's an opening, if you've already been attending school as a drop-in child, they would rather have a family that they've already built a relationship with. But I would just recommend going to the school. And also, most of the schools want you to schedule a tour, but there is a benefit to just showing up. I wouldn't do it during nap time, but it will give you, even if they can't give you a tour, it'll at least allow you to gauge their response in that moment because they may be able to show you something and then ask you to come back because there are times now, especially with staffing issues, that schools are short staffed and it's not that they're hiding anything. They truly can't go give you a tour because they're needed somewhere else. But you can see them in their worst moments. And as a parent, I know what you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to add to that, I know families that call our program, we do tell them to call to schedule an appointment because, for example, in family childcare, if it's just the one caregiver, they can't just immediately accept someone walking in. So we do encourage them to call, aside from just calling and saying, I add my child to the list, call, try to see if you can visit. I always encourage 3 to 4 programs, do a stop by, basically see them as they're naturally working around. Is this where I want to see my children? Do I see other children happy? Do I see the teachers happy and involved so that they can make a decision and get on their list and show them that you're interested by connecting back. Don't fall off of the radar. Call back and say, I'm going to say, Casey, do you still have an opening for that infant? I'm still interested. So we do encourage them to call back often or to try to connect back with those programs to show the program that they are indeed interested in a spot there.
And taking a future space. A lot of people are like, no, I need it now. And they don't want to take future space, like enrolling. If you can get a space and even if it's in a couple months, take it. Yes. Because most schools have a timeline that you can change your mind, but at least you've secured that space. You probably have to pay a registration fee. So you could ask about what the policy is if they find care prior to that. But we see a lot of parents that are hesitant. It's like, no, I need it now. And it's like, yeah, but we're telling you there's space in 3 months. The best thing to do would be to save that space because they could probably enroll somewhere else and at least they have that on the back burner. So if they're not happy with the place that they're at, they're already in the waiting. They know they have a transition they can make. And a lot of schools are enrolling 2 times a year, January and actually 3 times, January, the end of the school year and the beginning of the new school year. So that's when people transition in and out because they're either moving or graduating. Those are good times to enroll.
Perfect. Thank you. This one I found really interesting too. How is our housing market affecting childcare in our area? Open to anybody.
I think significantly. I mean, when you're looking at, you know, the combination of just childcare, adding up, if you have another child in your transportation, it was it transportation, I can't remember, but at almost 40%, then you have your, you know, that's all you have left is your 60% to cover all your other expenses. So as your homeowner insurance is going up, the cost of food is going up, it just is compounding. And I think the other thing that's really important to pay attention to is those who don't qualify for any assistance. Sometimes that gap between, you know, the median income, if you look at that as opposed to whether or not you're qualifying or what you're, if you're at federal poverty level, that's a big difference. So some individuals that don't qualify actually have a larger cost burden on their household. They're much more larger. And so that's why we see people, you know, you hear parents say all the time, well, one of us had to stop working because we were working to pay for childcare. That was the only thing, like the only reason we had a job was to pay for childcare, or was taking my entire paycheck. So significant impact on housing.
I think it's affecting our workforce. We have so many employees that do not, we have a beautiful facility that just built next to our Punta Gorda facility, and it's a Punta Gorda Housing Authority space, and many of our employees don't qualify, which is crazy to me. They can barely afford to live, but they don't qualify for government assisted housing. And these are the people that housing should be for, because they're supporting our community.
Exactly.
So there's a disconnect between, I mean, if they were to tell us they could only work 25 hours a week, they could live there. But what incentive is that giving them?
Exactly. It's like they've already fallen off the benefits cliff.
Yeah.
They don't qualify anymore, and you're almost more, you're worse off than you would be if you didn't.
And they're taking payroll advances to pay their mortgage, or to pay their rent. And some of those same people, even because the level that's set to get school readiness, some of them don't qualify for childcare services. So they're paying, and childcare providers as a whole mostly give 50% of a discount to their staff children, but they're not qualifying. So these services that are available, I feel like from the government, are intended to support the community's growth, but it's not serving the population that's doing the job. It's serving people who are working part-time to keep their benefits, or they are going to school, which is great too. But it should, childcare workers are the prime example of who those housing situations should benefit, and also the childcare services.
Yeah. And the one other thing that's really important that we saw with the accessibility piece is, the less income you have, generally the farther out from your workplace you are living. And so then to use a voucher or a subsidy is to drive all the way in, you know what I mean? So it's your accessibility gets even less in that gap time. So you have to be farther away. So you're at a deficit of just time and travel, and then expenses are higher too. And so when you don't have childcare proximal to yourself, it's, or to your work.
Yeah. All right, do we have any other questions from? Oh, okay.
If you're okay with that.
Yeah, just a couple more minutes and then we'll move on to the panel discussion.
Angela asks, can anyone address the huge cost of starting a center? Staff, materials, and equipment.
Certainly,
Address the cost or the support of that.
So you can handle that how you
I
wish.
think there is no support for that. You essentially have to
Have your
be
own
able to
capital.
support that. And it's expensive. And this is why you don't see new
Maybe
child.
she was wanting to know how much it would be.
I think she's familiar. They recently opened a school, so she just experienced it, and I think she's wondering how.
There's no support.
Yeah, that's why you don't see childcare centers popping up. I'm sure parents, and I've heard parents make comments before, like they count the kids and think, "Wow, you just must be, walking on golden brick roads." And it's like, no, actually, the margins in childcare are so slim, and the liability is high. Otherwise, you would see them opening everywhere. So startup costs are not supportive. I wish during COVID, when all the grants were coming out, that the people making the decisions kind of thought about, not you guys, hopefully they knew, making the decisions kind of thought about where all those funds were going, because for places like Bloom, we were operational the whole time. We were being forced to spend those funds in our school, which was great. It got us some really nice materials, but we would have loved to take that funding and create more childcare openings, but it was restricted in that regard, when it was probably the biggest need was more capacity, but you had to use it within the entity that you were issued. So I think there is that disconnect of awareness of what's what the struggle is versus.
Okay. All right, so Tina Rambo says, another thought, I absolutely love that so many of our ECE employees are parents first and have young children. It brings so much heart to the ECE field. However, a challenge that comes with this is the expectation for the child care center to provide discount tuition for their children. While this isn't a requirement, we always recognize that the wages we're able to offer are not always enough to support families, especially when factoring the cost of childcare. This creates a difficult situation for ECE schools, as we often choose to offer reduced rates to retain high quality staff and keep the school running. Unfortunately, these discounts can result in a financial loss of sometimes more than $15,000 to $30,000 per year, making it incredibly challenging for small schools to expand or grow due to limited funding.
I think it's a valid point, and there's no tax credit for that. So like when we give a discount to our employees, there's nothing given back, right? So that missing income is not subsidized in any way. And the best scenario is when they do qualify for subsidy, because although the rates typically exceed the subsidy, when you take the 50% staff discount, the employees don't owe anything at that point. But I would say it's more common for us, and at Bloom, at least, for many of our employees don't qualify. But some do, but many do not qualify. So that 50% discount is just a loss. So there's no incentive.
It's a trap for
Yeah.
childcare owners because
You have to do it. It's almost an industry standard that you give that discount because it makes sense that you would get one.
Yeah.
But the cost of care is more than 50% of the tuition charge. So I think she's just making a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yes, Casey.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our next section, which is actually the discussion. We're going to discuss, which are some things we've already touched on, how to expand access to affordable quality childcare, innovative solutions to improve services, and building public-private partnerships. So it's kind of a good segue into what you were just talking about, like solutions like what you said, a tax credit perhaps for, giving a 50% credit, things like that, or, possibility of, or Michaela's also going to discuss the business tax credit, which I think a lot of businesses have said that they don't know how to take that credit, how to use it, or. Okay. Can you unmute her? Or she can unmute herself?
I did not, so she can.
Yeah, I can unmute myself.
Hi, Kay. Did you want to say something?
Are you, you know what? I was going to ask a question, but I think you're going right into it. So never mind.
Oh, do you want to ask something to get us started?
I did raise my hand. I did raise my hand, but you're going right into it. It's natural flow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So do you guys want to get started on what you're thinking? I mean, based on the areas you come from and the organizations you come from, what your ideas are on how we would be able to expand access to affordable and quality childcare. Anybody want to start?
Well, there's some things we can control.
Yeah.
Some things we really
Yeah, well,
don't.
things in your
within
control.
our-
Yeah. Within your
we can't
purview.
Fix the insurance market overnight.
Right.
But like I said, we can work together for workforce, and so all the people here, you guys, future makers, get people who maybe want to enter the workforce, we get employers, early childhood, learning coalition. How do we work together to make sure whoever people who are interested in working in childcare beginning, we get them in the right spot so they can get the training and take advantage of resources we have available. And especially anyone who wants to do an adult ESOL class, it's going to be a prime market for, or at least kind of changing the trend, in Charlotte County. Maybe it's a model other parts of the state could do too, and because it just seems like you hear waiting list, and people calling in or showing in person, and hopefully we can flip a switch where the business are able to expand because they have the workforce and they don't have all these strains on them to meet their workforce needs. And so that's one thing we can control.
Yeah.
And we can't control insurance markets, at least I don't know where we can do that, but those little small things start there. And I don't know how many childcare employees we have in Charlotte County as a whole. Be interested to have that data. You guys are able to get that. What the workforce looks like, and so then we can kind of calculate with math. Okay, well, we add 5 or 10 a year or 20 per year to the market. How will that change?
Right. that's a valid point, that we can only do what we can do in our control. But I was also thinking of, from the standpoint of what Casey said, that it's so expensive to open a new facility that it's almost impossible, and that's why we don't see them popping up. So are there things that we can do to help with that? Like, I know that Ann said that they have a mentorship program that they help people open. So are there ways that maybe the collaboratory could, or Future Makers could possibly help with that? Or ideas that we could, throw around about how we would be able to work together and make that happen.
I mean, I think that if you were to look for some examples around the nation, there are counties that have worked together with private providers to expand childcare options in their area. And it's definitely a partnership, not a partnership in business, but a partnership in the project.
Yeah.
It was post-COVID. Many places were struggling. So I think taking a look at that, see how they approached it and how are they doing now? Because why reinvent the wheel if other people have found success in creating those partnerships, and they're public-private partnerships. Yeah. And that's a little bit challenging, but it's kind of a win-win situation when you have great providers in your area and they need the means to expand. In my opinion, it's better than bringing in, like, new providers are always going to be a great addition to the team, but expanding your current providers is going to show that appreciation, but also bring more quality providers into your space. But I think looking at what other people have already done is a great place to start. And I can provide connections for a couple of examples of people, because I think you could look and see how they're doing.
Yeah,
I
that would
do.
be awesome.
I do think we need to go back to the housing and the transportation too, because we have a lot of childcare facilities in Charlotte County that have openings and don't have children. So we've had a lot, right, say, we need children. So it might be families are leaving.
Okay. I mean, we can follow up with that and see if we can help in some way, to see if we can figure out where the disparity is between availability and, vacancies in the childcare centers.
I think the other thing that you were hitting on is how many employers don't understand the child care tax credit and how to use it. And so I think convening employers to share how to use it, literally how to get started so that they can be part of the solution. And Michaela and I were on a call yesterday, so I'll be repeating myself, but bringing employers to the table to see the actual need there and ways that they could work together. A lot of employers also have real estate that is sitting, or they have inventory that we could get creative on working together to creating more. And when you see that mapping is so critically important because you see where the activity is. And if you have most of your employees are going to a centralized location, that's where you're going to need childcare for the most part, at least for one of those parents. And so when you can see this is where commerce is, this is likely where childcare needs are, then those businesses can have an opportunity to work together to support their employers. And the other part of that is that they have, if they're a larger employer, they have greater access to then maybe providing healthcare for the childcare employees, or utilizing that kind of switching on their tuition reimbursement, that maybe if you don't need tuition reimbursement, you could use, tuition for childcare. So there's all these solutions within structures. You just have to think outside of the box. But employers not knowing that this credit is even available, they may also not know the need of their employees. So that's the other part, is employees really have to advocate for themselves, because you're probably not the only parent that is in the same situation, that you need childcare, you need help, and you need to make sure that your employer knows how dire that is, because it's expensive to replace your employees. Yeah, really expensive.
So with that in mind, are childcare providers as businesses exempt from this credit, since we're providing that childcare to our staff?
That's a really good question.
That could be an amazing support.
If you have to pay corporate, there's specific tax liability you have to have. There are 5. Most providers do not pay. If you do, it'd be corporate income tax most likely. But that is really it.
Again, no offense, but what a disconnect.
That's not my thing.
Yeah,
No.
what a disconnect.
Totally.
Yeah, the people who we need the most, that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone in some regard, right? It would create the capacity. It wouldn't solve the problem, but I think that's what's happened in the childcare industry in general, for the history of that I've been in it, is that it's a disregarded entity as a business and also as a school. So where do we fit in to the conversation? People need it. Solutions get put out there, but they're not exactly affecting the stakeholders in the way that they should to create a change.
I have a couple questions here. Barbara Short asked, are new business startup funds available to open new childcare facilities from the federal or state? And then she also asked, it was my understanding the employer childcare tax credit
Could be used for on-site work childcare service. Is this being explored?
Maybe we should go into that next, Michaela, do you think? Because there seems to be a lot of questions.
Yeah, I
around
can,
it.
yeah. Yep, and I can cover that, and I can also kind of segue into some other solutions. So,
Okay.
so the child care tax credit, it was passed last legislative session, and it does allow for 3 options, which I will describe in more detail on the next slide, but don't go there yet. You do, the application opened in October, okay? And admittedly, there was not a lot of information provided beforehand. We at the Florida Chamber were huge advocates for the tax credit as a good starting place. Representative McFarland got this over the finish line. She sponsored the original legislation and got rolled to the tax package that was passed. And it allows for $5 million over the next 3 years to support this program. So employers can take advantage of it, and it is a use or lose situation. I literally got numbers today emailed to me that only 856,000 of the 5 million have currently been utilized, and that is 3 businesses in the state of Florida. So we definitely have more way to go, and maybe the holidays, like, we're optimistic that this will see an increase in the utilization. And I personally just stand ready to, and I offer it all the time to help businesses think through this, because oftentimes they don't necessarily want to be in the business of childcare, right? Their employee, their specialty, I guess I should say, might be in healthcare. It might be in manufacturing. Like, that's their business. They don't know childcare. And so if you want to go to the next slide, there's options for them where they don't have to know the ins and outs of delivering this service, right? To the points that have been made, there are already quality early learning providers in your community who likely would expand happily to serve those employees if there was space available. And what the tax credit allows for, one option is to build on-site childcare. Now, admittedly, this is expensive. Oftentimes, you're going to want to start with an employee survey. I kind of saw that coming up in the questions. So our employee guide does have a templated survey that employers can use. I know there have been some chambers of commerce that have even put it out and tried to survey the childcare needs. But on-site childcare is one solution, and you might decide to do that because you're a large company. You also might decide to do that because you're a small to medium-sized company, and you also want to provide slots to the community, right? So you could take a tax credit up to 50% of the startup cost of actually building that facility. That is option number 1. Option number 2 is essentially you can build that facility, but then who's going to run it? If you're going to contract with an existing provider, like a Childcare, which I'll talk a little bit about, or a private provider that's local to your community, who's the Bloom, right, of the world, you can contract with them, and you can take a tax credit for that fee that you're being charged, right, for the teacher salary, what have you. And then option number 3 is that you can actually provide tuition assistance. And I'm going to just say out loud for the good of the order here that when we talk about any sort of childcare, what might be called subsidy, a lot of the times, we want to reposition this work in this type of scholarship or financial aid really as tuition assistance. So if you're going to give an employee $300 a month to support that childcare cost for their child, right? So $3,600 a year, that can also be taken as a tax credit. So that's really the 3 options. There are minimums and maximums depending on the size of the company. So most of it starts at $250,000 as a minimum, up to I think $1 million. And the application process itself, if you have not thought through the ins and outs, can kind of be scary, because you're going to be asked things like, how much money do you think, basically you're going to use in this tax credit? How many employees is it going to impact? And things of that nature. So I would just encourage folks that if they do have questions that about the application, or maybe if they don't know where to start, feel free to give us a call. I know the early learning coalitions often stand ready, but we're here to be a resource in that regard. And then in that blue box are the specific tax liability that companies have to have. If you have any questions about, do I qualify for that? Do I pay that tax? I'm I'm an early child care provider. I don't know if I pay for. You could definitely ask the tax expert that question. I am not qualified for that. The Department of Revenue, who actually facilitates the application process, they're the ones who you will apply to if you want to take advantage of the tax credit. They can answer that question for you as well. But that is essentially the options available through the employer tax credit. So I think that's the only slide really on that. I think I have on the next slide, okay, so two examples, if you will, of employers who are actually doing this. So close by, there's a medical manufacturing company in Collier County who just built on-site childcare, and I'm pretty sure it might be open at this point now. And they are taking advantage of the tax credit. To my understanding, they're one of the 3 businesses. They were going to do this without the tax credit. To be honest with you, they've done this in other states where they have employees, but they're not only offering slots for their specific company's employees, they're in kind of a square where there are other medical healthcare related companies. Mm-hmm. So there are additional slots provided for those facilities as well. So yeah.
The partner in the hospital.
Yeah. And then the other one is just kind of an example of this is Childcare. They happen to serve on our advisory board at the Florida Chamber Foundation, but this could be any provider in your community. But Lockheed Martin, Universal, Moffitt Cancer Center, like there are a lot of companies who bring Childcare in, and they actually will fund the slots through a tax credit program. And Childcare just serves as the provider, so that CEO, that HR leader, does not have to know the ins and outs of actually the operations of childcare, right? Doesn't have to get the weeds of all of that, because it can be complex and it can be overwhelming. And what we don't want is for folks to hear all of that and feel like, oh man, I can't do this. Instead, we want them to see that there are real solutions that Florida-based companies have already done and implemented successfully, and that they're seeing an ROI, so that we can encourage more participation in the tax credit. So I'm happy to take questions. These are not the only solutions. The tax credit is not a silver bullet. There are great solutions across the country where I think Megan's point was folks have, there's an example out of Iowa where sometimes when we talk about the tax credit to companies in Florida, they say to me, well, Michaela, it's not fair if I offer $300 a month to my employee because I can't do that in Indiana. They don't have a tax credit. What do I do? And I say, well, do you have a tuition reimbursement plan already? And we've seen this, right? There's like real companies who have done this where they've said, okay, we're going to expand our tuition reimbursement, our upskilling, our professional development money that we give our employees, and we do allow them to take that and use that for their own children if they choose to do so, right? And it's still that $250, $300 a month allocation, but it goes a long way when you're talking about, $1,200 a month for an infant, or $900 a month, right, for a 3-year-old. So there are some good solutions we've seen where folks are essentially, building, I'm going to call workforce housing, and maybe the bottom layer is a child care facility, right? Like licensed, regulated, quality programming, and coming up with those types of partnership opportunities. And then, of course, we think about just the higher education institutions, which are, training our future workforce. We see a lot of community colleges, state colleges here in the state of Florida that are offering a child care solution. There's good backup care concepts out there where, maybe that employee does actually have child care for most of the time, but for whatever reason, they're closed on Valentine's Day, and you still have to work, right? Shout out, my daughter's 3.5. That's a real thing. So what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do when you still have to show up for work and your child doesn't have care? Well, now I have to call somebody else, right? And if my employer, right, they want to offer backup care or emergency care, there are companies who specialize in that. We're about to put on a webinar just on that issue in March so that folks can see that UPS and companies of that nature are offering that. And those companies will they come in and they just retrofit. It's not ideal, right? We're not talking about this a solution that you want 365, but for that just once in a while situation where you've got, you know, a day off of care, they come in and say, train licensed teachers, that company takes care of it. And you don't have to worry about it as the employer. So, I mean, there's so many different models, things that are already happening. The tax credit stands there as an opportunity to help offset the cost for employers, but there's so much to do. So I'll stop there. Take other questions, but yeah.
Anybody have questions? Oh, I do have some questions. Let's see here. It was my understanding that the employer childcare tax credit could be used for on-site work childcare service. Is this being explored? You should just answer that.
Yeah.
Has the school district or other large employers surveyed childcare?
Yes, right.
It may help to have the data on employee needs and desires.
As a school district.
I don't like HR, you know, in terms of what they've done.
And then let's see here. Angela comments, Jennifer, we are hearing the same thing from other providers. We have openings as well. I'm trying to understand because another person said in Inglewood, they have early care providers that have open slots and are looking for families. Let's see here. And then Angela also said, am I understanding correctly that this is only for eligible tax paying corporations? Correct.
Yes, you would have to define
Yes.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
And someone else said about the comment about has the school district or other large employers been surveying their employees? And they said this did 100%. That's all the comments I have so far.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything they would like to add or comment?
With that, Maria, when I just stepped out, I was just do a little research because we were talking about, you know, funding and some barriers to entry. You know, at the end of the day, Casey's here representing the business, right? It is a business, slim margin business, as she's stated, and I totally understand. But barriers to entry for new providers, right? We said what? That
Sounds like
they have to be already established or history in the industry. Well, I forgot the insurance.
That's just for insurance.
Yeah, on the insurance side and or with a franchise model, right? So just thinking outside the box, which is what we like to do in this office, and this sometimes it gets me in trouble with Kay, but you know, she'll chime in if I'm out of line. But you know, is looking at alternate motives to be able to fit the need. You know, and one thing that was launched by state of Florida early last year was the state's small business credit initiative, okay, which is about $488 million to various, the discussion came up about seed money or startup money. One of the models in there that is a supported funding opportunity is franchise, just for consideration out there. You know, and the additional resources as well, you know, for those that are companies that are considered economically or socially disadvantaged, you know, be it woman-owned, veteran-owned, or minority-owned firms as well. And just for consideration as we're looking, you know, scattering ideas on a broad board. But that might be one worth pursuing, is looking at the State Small Business Credit Initiative.
Thank you, Mark.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's for Michaela. Somebody, I think it was Michaela, mentioned that there's a large company or large business survey out there. If it was you, great. If it was somebody else, maybe you can answer this. But I would love to take a look at that survey and offer it if possible. If I need to, you know, tweak it or whatever for copyright purposes, I will. But if we could see that survey and offer it to some of our business community, our larger employers. I have had a large employer in our manufacturing district out at the airport area express interest in having a daycare for his own purposes for his employees. And he's building right now, and he's going to have over 100 employees, probably about 120. I would love to allow him to utilize a survey like this. And I'd also love to just kind of blanket send it out to our business community and see where their needs are. You know, we can make it our own, and see. You know, I've heard in the past, and I think we heard it today again, is that, you know, West County, which is in Inglewood, on you know, near our beaches, employees are traveling quite a distance to work, and there's no nearby. There might be openings in some other parts of the county, but it's not within a reasonable distance of where they live or where they work. So there's a real conundrum for them. And I know that, you know, when I was a million years ago, when I was a new mom, at one point when I had my first baby, I had a daycare that was like within really close proximity of where I worked. But then as time evolved and my job evolved, I was doing traveling, and I would be not at my work. I would be traveling to another location within the community, and I'd have to go all the way back during rush hour to try to get my child before the daycare closed, and travel another 40 minutes to my home. So that it just wasn't working. So I get the logistics piece of it all. It can't be cookie cutter for everybody, but to be able to hear what the real issues are out there. I do hear that that cost is a problem, and these workers at these daycares are totally undervalued. They're not getting paid enough. It's not the daycare's fault. It's just the way it is right now. We've got to try to turn that around somehow, working with the state. Maybe we can get some subsidies. I don't know. But you know, we got to continue this kind of conversation. But anyway, where I was going with that is the survey. I think that if we can get a better feel from our business community, where are we with the employees that have younger children, I think that'll help us know what our next step is going to be.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. As a data nerd myself. So if you go back to the slide on the employer guide, and I apologize, I don't have like the link right here with me handy, but that QR code, actually the survey I was talking about is inside our employer guide. So that'll walk you through high level what's the tax credit. It has the survey in there. You know, and contact information for the person at the Department of Revenue who deals with the tax credit and such, but that'll at least give you a starting point. We just did we being the Florida Chamber Foundation, we just did a landscape analysis in Collier County for early learning, and we asked those types of questions. We surveyed parents and providers, we did focus groups, we interviewed stakeholders all across the county, and really tried to pinpoint what are the real problems. And I had that slide sort of showing you that there's you know, the net commuters and the average commute time, right? And so to your point, it might be that the care that's available, and I think that's what I heard today, is just not where people prefer it. And so you might want to include that in addition, you know, on the employer survey that we have as a template. It's certainly not copyrighted. It's totally there for everybody's use as they see fit, add to it, detract from it, what it's there for you to use as you please, just as a starting place. But I think that's a really good question and very valid. And you might want to know what age band, right, of kids, because again, a lot of folks cannot find infant care. They can't find toddler care. And so they're staying out of work for multiple years because they just can't, that wait list is 2.5 years long. You know what I mean? They're like well before even planning being pregnant, having to get on a wait list if they wanted care as soon as that child was delivered. So yes, feel free to use the employer guide and the survey therein. And then I just wanted to touch on the fact that we've been talking about affordability, and I was waiting to weigh in on this, and I'm hoping that it fits here. But, you know, we talk about expanding access to affordable quality care. The primary way that we do that through in the state of Florida for vulnerable families who are making the lowest wages in theory in our state, is through the school readiness program, right? Through those contracted providers that work with the Early Learning Coalition. And what we know about the entrance threshold of that program right now is that it is too low. So you're talking about 150% of federal poverty level, which for a family of 4 with 2 children, 2 working adults, making minimum wage, like they do not qualify for the program because they're making more money, right? It's a $46,000, $800 max, right? So they can't. So we really are disincentivizing, both of our parents, working. That's why we see typically in the program right now that you've got one parent, a single parent with 2 kids in the program, because they're the only ones who can qualify. And there is a work requirement or an education requirement. And of course, it's only going to get worse, right? If we do nothing, if we do not change the threshold, which is one of our policy priorities this year at the Florida Chamber of Commerce, is to move it from federal poverty level to state median income. And I know the Association of Early Learning Coalitions are there with that. I know the Children's Councils and Trust are there, and a lot of our other partners around the state. But we're hopeful that with investment will make a significant difference from families and truly serve those children who do need care, right? So I just wanted to say that for everybody, so that you kind of know that that's a conversation that's definitely happening, and we're advocating for on the commerce side every single day.
I think in that regard, it could be a double win to give some sort of incentive for employees that are applying for school readiness and working at contracted provider centers, because you need those employees in order to provide the spaces. And at times, especially if the bar or barrier for entry is lower, we could get back to the point where there's wait lists for school readiness funding, which that was pre-COVID. There was a wait list to get funding. And if the childcare employees can't get care for their kid, they can't get the job. And I would say the majority of our working population in childcare is working mothers. And so when we can't get them in because they can't get funding, we can't fill those spaces. And so I think some of the providers have capacity that they can't fill because they don't have staff, but the capacity is there. So I have always thought that if there was some priority that could be given to working in not just a DCF, not just a licensed facility, but a contracted provider with the coalition or school readiness VPK, I think that would be helpful, and meeting the income criteria. And healthcare is another struggle. I just want to bring that up as a benefit for childcare providers. Most childcare providers can't provide health insurance. And even when you do provide health insurance, the 50% contribution by the employer still doesn't allow affordability for the employee. So we once we were able to get a policy, we couldn't get our employees to take the policy because they couldn't afford the 50%. So at this point, we've now increased our subsidy to 60% to get enough people to hold the policy. But it's just healthcare and childcare. I am really confident those 2 things would solve the employment issue in early childhood education. If we could advertise that working in childcare in Florida guarantees you income requirement. Obviously, if they have a husband, that makes a certain, but it gives you, childcare services and access to health insurance. What a game changer that would be. So it's just disheartening sometimes to see the disconnect between the decisions that are being made and the actual root cause of some of these problems. Because some of the money that has been thrown at childcare in the last few years could have really changed the game. And unfortunately, it didn't.
I want to add to that too, a retirement.
Yeah.
I worked in childcare for years and nothing to show for it in the end, other than a great career, but no retirement at all.
I think even having a group policy. So it somehow, I don't know how that could work, but even a mom and pop provider could be a part of a group policy, a larger group policy of, being included with other childcare providers so that you could have a more competitive rate. Could be helpful because you could band together and the employer could still be responsible for that portion, but it makes it accessible to them. I think it would be really helpful.
In Ohio, there was an organization called COSI, the Council on Small Enterprises, and what they allowed employers in the area to do was to join COSI and then be able to buy the insurance for their employees through that and get that access to that much better quality, a much more affordable price. And I haven't really seen that down here in Florida, but maybe it's because that really assisted companies in that small to medium size to be able to offer insurance and be able to afford it, and their employees could afford to use it. So.
Yeah, and then once we offered it, wouldn't you know that it also removed people's ability to participate in Obamacare? So some of our employees lost their health insurance because we offered health insurance. So it backfired in some ways, but we needed it. We had to make that decision knowing that some of our single moms were going to lose their nearly free health insurance to offer the larger population of our employees health insurance. But I do think those 2 things as far as the employment aspect, not necessarily expanding the capacity of childcare, but I think employers would be more likely to expand if the employment is a challenge.
Well, Dr. Granger's on that, right?
Somebody else quickly asked, is there, are families with young children with developmental delays supportive of child care centers in Charlotte County? And are they equipped to work with children with developmental delays?
Yes, absolutely. So many, well, we're seeing a lot of children with developmental delays in the childcare world. And our team, this child development and education team, will go in and assist the teachers and also help get referrals through fiddlers and early steps so they get some support that way.
And then Angie with United Way of Charlotte County says, the Parent Advisory Council we have is sharing lots of insights, including the concept that many parents are wanting to keep their children at home rather than place them in a child care setting for a variety of reasons. This is important to understand further. In following school data through our Charlotte County Reads project, we know that children in kindergarten and the first grade are in need of a reading buddy. We are seeing this type of support is moving the needle on learning gains. Lastly, the 4th and 5th graders in the after-school settings are significantly behind and could benefit from significant intervention, mentors, and supports prior to entering middle school. All the above is perhaps beyond the topic of childcare, early learning. Of this webinar today, the importance of students having access to early learning and after-school programming and extracurricular activities are all protective factors for our kiddos. Looking forward to more conversations on the topic today. Thank you for convening. Please forward slides when you can.
Will do. We're almost at the end of the time, so I'm going to thank everybody who participated very much. I enjoyed it very much, and I think we have a lot of things that we all can work on, and I look forward to getting some information from you, Casey. I'd really appreciate it on the public-private partnerships you mentioned, and looking forward to what we can see in the future. I think that for me, I would like to work on the survey with Kay. That will be my action, and I think that once we do the survey and get some information, we'll have a better idea of how we can help and move forward. I'm going to pass it to Kay, who's amazing at giving closing remarks and talking. So Kay, it's all you.
Well, thanks, Maria.
You're so welcome.
I wanted to, we have covered an amazing amount of ground here today. Thank you so much. And I think it's very clear that it's not just a family issue, but it's a workforce and economic development issue here. Childcare it goes beyond what at first blush what it appears to be. So we look forward to continuing to build our partnerships. I appreciate everybody. Deeply appreciate our panelists, the community leaders, and really all of you that attended this webinar. Thank you so much. Let's keep the conversation going. You've got some great ideas, resources. We're going to make them all available to everybody on our website. You see my email address right there. Our website is www.clearedfortakeoff.com. Please go on our website at any time. We want to tap into that younger workforce. We need them. A lot of our baby boomers are going to be retiring soon. We've got a lot of people leaving our county to work. We want them to stay in our county, and we want them to have all of the resources and support that they need so that they can do that. We're bringing in some really exciting businesses into our community, and lots of opportunity for people to make some great wages, which might help offset some of these costs, but that doesn't solve the problem completely. We know that. So on behalf of the Charlotte County Economic Development Office, we want to express our deepest gratitude for you being here today. Let's keep the conversation going, and thanks again. Let's work together to create a future for where families, businesses, and community can thrive. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Want to end the meeting, Maria, or you want me to end it?
How many were there virtual?
I don't know. It says 11 people, maybe.